Hello and welcome to another edition of Fight News Now. I'm your host, John Pollock, and for the next 30 minutes, we're going to be discussing all of the news happening in mixed martial arts, and we're going to be joined by Mark the Hammer Coleman, Krzysztof Soszyński, as well as Sam Stout and Chris Clements. Our analysts John Ramdeen and Robin Black will be navigating this Saturday's UFC card in Cincinnati on 3 rounds, and Bryan Cranston will stop by on the shift this week, chatting Godzilla. But we kick off the show as we do every week with this week's newsmakers. A welterweight battle between Matt Brown and Eric Silva headlines this Saturday's UFC stop in Cincinnati, Ohio. For Brown, he returns after a back injury that took him out of his fight with Carlos Condit last December and looks for his 7th consecutive victory as we take a closer look at the Immortal One and Eric Silva.
At the end of 2011, Eric Silva was coming off a 42nd TKO victory over Luis Ramos and was considered by many to be the next big thing in the welterweight division. Matt Brown, on the other hand, was just 1-4 in his last 5 fights, and with a 12-11 record, his days in the UFC were numbered. Fast forward to 2014 and a lot has changed. Since his debut, Indio has gone just 3-3. He has shown flashes of the form that made him a top prospect in first-round finishes of Charlie Brenneman.
And there's the tap from Charlie Brenneman, Eric Silva!
Jason High.
Jason High able to wiggle out of it, see if he switches into a triangle, and he does it. How about that?
Takanori Sato.
Sato may not be able to take too many more of these. Eric Silva, that's knocked him out.
However, setbacks against John Fitch and Dong Hyun Kim have shown the limits to the Brazilian's potential. Over the same period of time, Matt Brown has been on fire.
Matt Brown is relentless. Huge uppercuts landing for Matt Brown. You see the referee, and he's going to stop it right there.
I mean, he looks wobbly, man. Yes, he does. That's it. It is all over. This is very close to being over. Nasty elbow to the body. I think it's all over. That's it. Into the head. And a nice knee. Piles in trouble. And Matt Brown's all over him. He's out.
Mike Powell is out. Matt Brown's winning streak.
Outstanding.
With 6 straight wins, 2 of which came in front of a huge audience on Fox, Matt Brown was finally given his chance to earn a title shot against Carlos Condit at UFC on Fox 9. However, the Immortal would have to pull out of the bout due to a herniated disc in his back. Instead, the 33-year-old has been given a main event slot in front of his home crowd. Can the Immortal outlast Silva and push his winning streak to 7? Or will Indio fulfill his potential and earn the first 2-fight winning streak of his UFC career?
It was a few weeks back that Michael Bisping took a major setback in the UFC's middleweight division, dropping a unanimous decision to Tim Kennedy in Quebec City. Recently, Bisping spoke about the loss to Kennedy at the Tough Nations finale and impacting his standing in the division, as well as fellow middleweight and training partner Mark Munoz.
Obviously, it was disappointing because, I didn't walk away the victor, obviously, but it was more disappointing for me because it was a boring fight, I'm not used to hearing the crowds boo. Through one of my fights, and I don't like that. I underestimated how little he would want to engage, let's put it that way. Mark Munoz runs a great facility here and a lot of great guys to train with. Obviously, in the past, I've stayed away from here because, me and Mark, we were scheduled to fight once, and in the past, with the same division, you've got to bite the bullet sometimes, don't swallow your pride and say, listen, that fight didn't go to plan. I need some training partners, Perillo and people like that, they really help me as coaches, but you need hands-on people every day trying to kick your ass and making phone calls and trying to get hold of sparring partners here and there, the same old guys, and kickboxing, that was the downfall. The downfall of that fight was in the preparation.
UFC 172 was highlighted by many great performances in Baltimore, but perhaps none more impressive than reigning light heavyweight champion Jon Jones, who defended his gold for the 7th time as he is coming up on 38 months as the division's champion. We catch up with the champion about his perception outside of the cage that is a constant work in progress.
At the end of the day, it's all a game, man, and it's really all about entertainment. I'm going to make some quotes that maybe I shouldn't have said, and I'm going to do some things that is going to make some people mad. I'm going to do some things that make people love you even more. But at the end of the day, it's my job, and it's all just a game. I'm just trying to look at it like if the people are entertained, hey, they're entertained, they're talking, and I'm just learning not to be as apologetic for the things that I do because I know that I'm a pretty decent person.
When it was announced that UFC Hall of Famer Mark the Hammer Coleman would be part of BJ Penn's coaching team on Tough 19, it immediately bolstered a lot of interest given the added flair for the drama that would be infused in the series. Recently, Mark Coleman was a guest on the MMA Report where he spoke to me about getting the call from Penn and coaching the team in Las Vegas.
Nobody ever wants to retire, let's face it. Nobody that I know, but the hip replacement kind of sealed the deal. And BJ Penn, I didn't know he was doing a show or anything. He called me up on a Friday. He just asked me if I could be his wrestling coach on the Tough show. When I walked through the gym doors, I just kind of, like riding a bike, it just came back to me. And it was one of the coolest things I've ever done in my life, other than compete.
And this week's tweet of the week comes courtesy of Josh the Punk Thompson, as these two have gone back and forth after Josh Thompson sent out a very angry tweet at Nate Diaz, then claimed his phone was stolen. Nate Diaz called him on it. Boy, Twitter is going to book a fight in 2014. Canadian fighter Chris the Menace Clements recently turned 38, and as he gets to the latter stage of his career, he's about to embark on a major change regarding his weight class. Clements was last seen at UFC 165 in Toronto last September, where he was stopped by Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, and he spoke to Fight Network about this change moving forward.
There's some young guys out there that are like amazing, you know? Especially Canada's own Jordan Ming. He's a really tough guy. I think he could be in the top 10 soon. You got some of the other guys like Eric Silva's a beast. Crazy guys in the welterweight division. I'm seriously considering my next fight being at lightweight. I just think as a striker with my like 67-inch reach, everybody calls me T-Rex. I just can't reach the guys that I'm fighting. Like even like Wonderboy, my last fight, I couldn't land a single punch on him with my hands. I could kick with them because to equal it out, but I can't reach these guys at that height. So I'm thinking about going down to lightweight. So and these young guys too, they're coming up. They're not karate guys. They're not jiu-jitsu guys. They're mixed martial arts guys, and they're super athletes, some of them. So it's pretty exciting to watch. I've never had a problem making 170. I've never, ever missed weight. My last fight, I think I was 174 the day I weighed in. Like I had cut 4 pounds, and it was really easy. So I just think if I just get my weight down and I maintain it longer, usually I only diet I walk around at 210, I diet for 12 weeks, and I make weight no problem. So I think I'll just start like way ahead of time, get myself down to 180, and not even going to take a fight until I'm walking at 180 for a month. And then I'll go from there.
Another fighter who last fought in Toronto is Krzysztof Sashinsky, who has not competed since UFC 140 back in December of 2011, where he was knocked out by Igor Pokrajac. The Polish experiment has not been sitting at home, but rather embarking on a film career with no less than 7 films in various stages of production in 2014, including the recent premiere of Tapped Out, and it is on the red carpet where we caught up with Sashinsky.
Well, I'm done training. I'm no longer fighting anymore. I retired a year ago. I had a big talk with Dana White about the injuries and all that stuff, and we just said, it's time for us to hang it up and let's move on to something bigger and better. So I'm the MMA manager over at the UFC gym in Torrance, and between that, I live in Los Angeles, so I get a chance to go to auditions. I start acting lessons very soon, just to learn. It's like MMA. You got to practice. You got to practice your wrestling. You got to practice your jiu-jitsu. You got to practice your striking. Same thing in this. I got to go to the auditions. I got to go get some lessons. I got to be in that environment to learn, and that's what I'm doing.
Another Canadian we check in with is 29-year-old Sam Stout, a veteran of 18 UFC fights dating back to 2006, who was recently stopped by KJ Noons at the Tough Nations finale in Quebec City. Recently, we spoke with Stout at Adrenaline MMA in London, Ontario, where Stout discussed life after fighting and where he sees the next step of his career taking him.
It's a really fickle business. That's the tough thing for people, you see a lot of these guys that go into this, spiral of depression, and, it can be a really hard sport to walk away from. If you're not planning for the future, then all of a sudden one day the rug's gonna get pulled out from under your feet and you got nothing, right? So it's like, you gotta be smart, you gotta save money away for a rainy day, and you gotta start thinking about what you're going to do next before it's time to start actually doing that thing. You have to plan ahead. That's something I've been aware of, and I've been around the sport and seen happen enough times to enough different people where it's like, oh man, this poor guy, was on top of the world a year ago, and now he loses a couple in a row, and it's like he doesn't know what to do anymore, and that's just not where I want to be. So I'm going to start looking at other things and looking at other options. I'm not saying I'm going to be a movie star, and that's going to be my next career move. But I'm going to leave the options open. I'm going to try it out. Use every opportunity in every different avenue that I can. You know, if somebody wants to offer me a movie part, I'll go for it. If somebody wants to offer me a seminar, I'll teach a seminar.
And finally, we hear from a man that never wanted to say the word retirement, but has found life after fighting, and that is former light heavyweight champion Chuck Liddell. The Iceman recently took part in a UFC Q&A and was asked to compare the safety records of mixed martial arts as compared to boxing, and we check in with Liddell for his answer.
It's safer. I think it's safer just from a standpoint of that you take less hits to the head, not only in the fights but in training. I mean, you got to train so many different things. You can't concentrate all on your striking. You got to work on your wrestling. You got to work on other things. And also with there's no standing 8 counts. So you're not getting dropped 4 times, 5 times in the same fight. Really, you see a lot of guys get, they get a standing 8. They get back up after 8, and they get it dropped again, and you get that repeated damage. So, you get dropped. You don't get a standing 8 in MMA. Someone jumps on top of you, it's over.
And I'm here with Jon Ramdian, and we just heard from the Iceman, Chuck Liddell. And coming up this weekend, we've got about 10 million fights coming up. What are going to be the 500,000 or so that you chat about with Robin Black today?
Well, obviously, Fight Night is happening this Saturday night in Cincinnati, Ohio. We're going to be talking about Matt Brown and Eric Silva, but it's not just the main event. The undercard is loaded with exciting matchups, and we'll tell you why you should tune in.
Cincinnati, Ohio.
Yeah.
Have you ever been?
I avoid it because Rich Franklin lives there.
Most people just avoid it. We've got 3 rounds coming up next on Fight News Now. Welcome back to Fight News Now. John Pollock here with you. And this Saturday night, the UFC hits Cincinnati, Ohio with a hard-hitting welterweight main event. And here to chat about that card and more, Jon Ramdian and Robin Black for another edition of 3 rounds. And we've got Casino Rama action Friday and then Cincinnati, Ohio. What a doubleheader.
But the main event, spectacular. You look at Eric Silva and Matt Brown. We all know they're going to entertain. They're going to do their jobs, probably deliver fight of the night. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I also disagree with you guys. I've been to Cincinnati, and that is a nice town with good people. So shame on the both of you. What were we talking about? Matt Brown. Matt Brown is a killer, and Eric Silva is the perfect foil for a fight like this. A guy who likes to come forward. You've got a guy who's going to be more than happy to engage him on the feet. Silva, there is a clear-cut strategy for him to look for that takedown and work that jiu-jitsu and wrestling game. I don't know if he's going to do it.
There's so many reasons to tune into this fight card. Of course, the main event is going to deliver, in my opinion. But you look at the undercard, Eddie Wineland taking on Johnny Eduardo. Eduardo, making his return to the UFC, has been away from mixed martial arts for almost 2 years. And welcome back to the UFC. You get the former WEC bantamweight champion, Eddie Wineland, who's coming off that impressive knockout victory over Yves Jabouin. So Johnny Eduardo in tough. It's a good thing that he happens to train with Renan Barão and Jose Aldo.
Yeah, there's always a good story. Every good fight has a good story. And the one that you got to be curious about in this one is, what the hell's this guy been doing for 2 years? Is he at the highest level in his room with the highest level guys at the highest level team? And in that room, is he beating guys up on the feet? Is he expanding his wrestling game? Is he going to look to submit you? Because you know what you get with Wineland.
Yeah.
You are getting a very powerful, very explosive, probably physically the strongest man at 135 pounds with great takedown defense and big hands and the willingness to take a shot. So what Eduardo is going to show up and fight that guy? I don't know, but Eddie Wineland never has a boring fight.
Eduardo, 12-1 in his past 13 fights, made his octagon debut. Unfortunately, had to take on Raphael Assunção, lost by decision, came back and beat Jeff Curran. The thing is, Jeff Curran, this is a man that's been fighting out of his weight class his entire career. He's naturally 125 pounds. Who knows? He could be even smaller than that. Fought at 155 pounds. So for Eduardo, yes, it's an impressive victory because you have a win over a guy that helped pioneer mixed martial arts, but undersized.
100%. Curran, if you talk to any fighter, of the 25, 35, and 45s that studies the sport and loves the sport, Curran is one of these guys that you give credit to. So that is a good win. But yeah, small guy, and Eddie Wineland's a huge 135er, so it's a very different fight.
We've got to talk about Ed Herman and Raphael Natal, both guys coming off losses. A great name value there, and people know Ed Herman. They followed his career in the UFC. Natal, people might not know who this guy is, but he is very talented. I went down to Renzo Gracie's academy in New York City. He's one of the coaches there. He trains there. Let's just hope he's been training with Chris Weidman, getting ready for, you know, some of the top level guys at 185.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's got a hell of a tennis game. I think we know that with Raphael Natal. But Tim Kennedy went in there and starched him.
Yeah.
And that was a tough one for him. And this is a really important comeback fight. And Ed Herman, man, there is a certain list of guys, when you see their name, you go, okay, everyone knows this guy, but man, this is a tough fight. Every time you're going to face an Ed Herman, every time you're going to face a guy, you know, who's the Joe Dirksen type of fighter that has come up through these ranks, every night's a tough out. Ed Herman is physical, he's big, he's powerful, he will wrestle, he will grind you, he's willing on the feet. It's a tough fight, it's a great fight. And man, Natal, I don't know, maybe he can beat him at tennis, but we're going to have to see if he can beat him in the octagon.
Ron Potts makes his UFC debut. He fought in EFC Africa. You could have seen him fight here on Fight Network, taking on Sal Palele, who sent Pat Barry packing, sent him over to Glory, and what happened? He got knocked out in Glory. Pat Barry in a hard spot right now, but Sal Palele looking good. Didn't look great against Krylov in his debut, but hopefully he's going to continue to improve.
Yeah, and we knew that this was a legit guy, and when him and Krylov had that fight, everyone was saying, oh, it's the worst fight we've seen in a long time. Hey, man, you got two big, powerful guys going that hard in the first 5 minutes. I don't care who you are. It's going to exhaust you, and you're going to end up with potentially a second and a third round like that. But we knew what to expect from Palele. This guy's been around for a long time. He's a very legit heavyweight, big, powerful heavyweight. This is a fun fight. Smoking Pots, wouldn't that be a good nickname for him? Wouldn't you appreciate that? I think this is going to be an interesting fight. Potts, what do you mean? Potts has only really faced South Africans and Egyptians and guys not known, not coming from a world of the highest level of training yet, where the sport hasn't really fully evolved there. But, you know, we'll see. We'll see what he has. This is a big step up for him, but he looks like a legit prospect.
Potts trains at Mark Robinson MMA. Robinson, a former ADCC champion, so why stand and trade with Sal Palele? You know that that's how he takes his opponents out. Put this guy down to the ground. But we all know it's mixed martial arts. Everybody working diligently to either have defensive wrestling or offensive wrestling. That's a big part of it. So even the best knockout artists still have some sort of wrestling game in today's game.
Yeah, for sure. And size is a big thing. At different times, Sal Palele was cutting to 265. I don't know what he's going to weigh Friday on the scales, but he's a big dude. Big, powerful guys. One strategy is, like that Krylov fight, try to fatigue him. But that's very hard to do because part of the way Krylov fatigued him was by being willing to take everything he gave him for 5 minutes. Hard to do. The heavyweights always put on a show. And, you know, Palele knows what it's like to feel that pressure of your first fight. Smoking Pots is going to be faced with that. So it's going to be an interesting one. I'm looking forward to that fight.
I'm looking forward to this featherweight matchup. Manny Gambirian and Nick Lentz, two talented guys. Gambirian has spent, obviously, his time training in Northern California. Nick Lentz started in Minnesota, went down to American Top Team, said one of the best moves ever. You have to look at his performance against Chad Mendez. We all know Chad Mendez is an absolute stud, going to be taking on Jose Aldo. We saw some great improvements from Nick Lentz.
Hey, man, Nick Lentz is one of these guys. What did I just say about Ed Herman? You know all that stuff I said about Ed Herman? You could say that about Nick Lentz, too. He's one of these guys. It's going to be a hard fight anytime you see him. But Mendez beat him by being a better wrestler than him, and Lentz is a hell of a wrestler, and maybe having the edge in striking, whereas Dunham beat him on the feet, and Mark Bocek put him in a state of consistent guard passing. I don't know how Manny Gambirian is going to look to beat him, but it's going to be a good one.
Mr. Pollock, who do you have in that fight and why?
I am picking Nick Lentz in that fight all night long, and Smoking Pots making a hell of a case for the alumni of EFC Africa. Thank you very much, and if you want to hear more of these guys, you can do so every single Monday at 7 Eastern for 5 rounds, a half hour of John Ramdine and Robin Black, as you can OD on those two men. But don't take your eyes anywhere, as Fight News Now will continue with The Shift, and this week's viral video is still to come. It's Fight News Now. We're back here, John Pollock with you, and later this week, Fight Network will have your quota of kickboxing action featuring encore presentations of Glory's most recent cards. This Thursday at 9 Eastern, you can catch Glory 16 featuring the one-night 4-man heavyweight tournament, and then Saturday at 5 Eastern, it will be all of the action from Glory 15. But right now, Walter White is back in your lives on this week's edition of The Shift. Bryan Cranston is the focus of this week's installment of The Shift. Coming up on May 16th, it will be Godzilla, released in theaters nationwide. You knew him as Walter White, the chemist, and now he morphs into Joseph Brody, nuclear physicist.
You are not fooling anybody when you say that what happened was a natural disaster. You're lying.
I grew up loving Godzilla. That's partly why I'm doing this movie, is because I was so enamored with Godzilla. Logic of a boy is that Godzilla didn't apologize for anything. He just destroyed everything in his wake, and that was so boy, you know, crush everything.
Something killed my wife!
He sees an anomaly in some sound patterns that others are trying to write off as earthquakes or something. And what I'm looking at, the data doesn't support that. He says that there's something more here.
I deserve answers!
And they don't want to listen to him. What makes Godzilla 2014 different from the others is that it's mature. How are we going to control it, kill it, capture? How is that even possible?
Once again, Godzilla will be out in theaters on May the 16th, but making its premiere right now, it's this week's viral video, which isn't going to be winning any awards whatsoever. Someone goes and finds those videos every single week, just for you. And that brings this week's Fight News Now to a close. You are all caught up on all of this week's news. Thank you to our guests, including Sam Stout, Christoph Sashinsky, Chris Clemens, and Mark Coleman. Don't miss the MMA Report each Thursday at FightNetwork.com in the podcast section and on iTunes. And on behalf of John Ramdeen, Robin Black, our Fight Network staff, I'm John Pollock, and we'll speak to you next week on another edition of Fight News Now.
Давай,